So now back to bliss, okay? So the word, remember the word, in feeling, every second we have a feeling. The word here is not referring to like we mean as emotion. It's simply a pleasant feeling, an unpleasant feeling, or a neutral. So nothing wrong with pleasant feelings. Buddha's not, attachment is a delusion. So then we conflate it with pleasure, so we assume pleasure's naughty. That's our mistake. No, attachment is a neurotic, deluded, ridiculous, junky state of mind that's completely distorted. And its job is to find something that we can have contact with that will then trigger a pleasant feeling. Well, nothing wrong with pleasant feelings. As Lama Yeshe says, the more pleasure, the better, dear. And Buddha's telling us, I've got a method that you won't believe the pleasure you'll have. And that's the point, but we find it hard to hear that. It sounds kind of a bit sort of confusing, Because the point that Buddha's making, our mind, in its natural state, when it is unencumbered by delusions, is naturally blissful. But it's not neurotic bliss. It's not extreme kind of hysterical bliss, which is how it is for us now. The mind is totally peaceful. Even different people who have a moment of experience in meditation all say that the joy and the bliss is quite distinctly different from normal bliss because it's utterly calm. You think of the joy we have through the senses. It's like very rough. It's very extreme. Very rough. The mind's berserk. But when the mind is more pure, more subtle in meditation, when it's more subtle, or when you're a highly evolved being who's gone beyond delusions, then it's super peaceful, super calm. It's not frantic. It's not desperate, It's very interesting. And the mind is naturally blissful. That's its nature. It's not something you've got to get. We're convinced that bliss is something you get when you get an object. Bliss is what you get when you give up the delusions. That's the Buddha's point. That's the Buddha's point, So it's very inspiring, very encouraging. In the beginning, the bliss you experience is physical, which is the grosser level. But as your concentration deepens, as you throw off the layers of blankets of grosser consciousness, you experience bliss exclusively at the mental level. This is because you've stopped perceiving the objects of the five senses. You have closed the door to superstition. All the contradictory concepts have disappeared. Your mind is now crystal clear. As if you could count every atom. As your concentration gets stronger and you reach ever subtler levels, your mind becomes super powerful. From his own experience, Lama Tsongkhapa says that you can reach a point of such clarity in your meditation that your mind feels almost infinite. Your mind is so clear, so sharp, it's as if you can distinguish all the subtle physical energies. You'll have the courageous thought, I can count all the atoms of the universe. This level of mind is more powerful than even scientific instruments. Now I think I'm showing pride in Buddhism, Lama said. See, we don't think of the mind like that, do we? You can hear people talk about being in the zone, or people who've got super concentration when they're doing all their math. If they're genius mathematicians or musicians, or you're running, people talk about that. That's just a taste, the grossest level of the taste of the joy of your own mind when you've got some concentration. Do you understand what I'm saying? Because the mind is relatively focused. Well, this is 1 billion times more subtle, 1 billion times more powerful, 1 billion times more capable. This is natural for all of us, You'll always be joyful. Well, that sounds hilarious, doesn't it? When you rise from your meditation, you feel liberated instead of uncertain and full of doubts and conflicts. You experience inner peace. You'll always have a happy, joyful vibration. In fact, you continuously experience tremendous pleasure. Now the pleasure of chocolate is nothing to you. What you can now experience with your mind is super. It's like another realm, another dimension. And when your senses do come into contact with their objects, of course, you experience bliss then too. You hardly even notice whether it's night or day. Actually, even now, when you have samsaric happiness, you have a similar kind of experience. You dance and drink all night, intoxicated with the pleasure. Time just flies. Well, this is what happens when you're intoxicated with the blissful experience of samadhi. And of course, this shows... Never mind that. Your body feels so light. They say it in the text. There's a particular word, and I forget it. Pliancy. There's a particular physical and mental pliancy is implied. You've got infinite, effortless control over every thought. But physical pliancy is something quite unusual, When you are out of meditation, the heavy energy of your body vanishes. Your body feels like a brand new body. You feel so light, almost as if you could fly, almost as if you had no body at all. Your body feels like effortless, Can you imagine? I mean, we know yourself when you're miserable, your body feels like a big lump of lead, doesn't it? You know, you remember there's one Nyingma Lama years ago, he passed away now, Dilgo Khyentse Rinpoche. He is enormously fat. He's what we'd call gross obese. He had to be carried by people. But you looked at his face, he was radiant, like a light as a feather, you know. Do you understand? Because it was like even though he had this massive body, it was like nothing. Because his mind is joyful, his mind is radiant, his mind is focused. Your sleep is like meditation. You know, almost you don't need sleep. I mean, Lama Zopa doesn't sleep. He might look like he does sometimes, but you don't. When your mind is so radiant, he's got more than concentration. He's got bodhicitta realizations and everything else. But this is just concentration. And the Buddha says we've had this in countless lifetimes. We've had it countless times. We've lost it, you know. You develop clairvoyance. Lama Tsongkhapa says that you'll develop clairvoyance. According to the Abhidharma teachings, there are two kinds. One is what we understand as intuition. Who asked me that question yesterday? There you go. So speaking generally, you know, about good intuition. An untrained sense. So I think here he's saying more like this. An untrained sense that we all have to some extent. For example, you might feel strongly without any logical proof that something has happened to your dear friend. That kind of thing is what he meant by intuition, you know, a sense that something's wrong or right. That could be something that's true, definitely. So the other can be gained by training the mind in meditation, as we're discussing here. You're able to see long distances as well as other people, including their minds. At first, your experience seems a bit like a dream, but the more your concentration develops, the more clearly you can see, just as you would if you were there in person. Maybe you can even touch faraway forms. This kind of clairvoyance is not imagining something. It's real, in the present, not fantasy. In other words, it's not complicated. If you can imagine these subtler levels of cognition, the capacity for cognition at a subtler level. The grosser level is what we function at day to day. And that's our conceptual thoughts and our senses. And we know, I mean, animals have fairly refined senses. They can be quite subtle. But still, this is way more subtle. And it's mental, not physical. It's mental. In other words, we've got, using the tantric model of the mind, we've got gross consciousness, which is the level we function now, which is inextricably linked to this gross body. And that's what confines our cognition to a very limited degree. Like, look at memory, you know. We think we're so clever. We don't remember anything. I mean, people talk about not remembering a past life. Well, excuse me, it's only not even noon. We could not account for 99% of today accurately if we had to write it down. And we just think that's normal. Now that shows how gross our mind is. So when you've accessed a subtler level of mind, beyond the conceptual, beyond the sensory, and it's awake in meditation, then it's infinitely more powerful. And in other words, mind at all levels, remember, cognizes something. Well, gross consciousness cognizes gross things. Subtle consciousness cognizes subtle phenomena. In other words, it's got the capacity to cognize the future, the past, long distances. It's just natural, the minds of others. And basically, Buddha says you can't really begin to help sentient beings until you've got clairvoyance, which means you've got to get single point of concentration. It's all part of the process, you know. There's a story of Lama Yeshe. This is really an example of what I mean of clairvoyance. Clairvoyance is low-level realizations. Then you need to realize emptiness. Then you need to get bodhicitta. Then you're really on the case, you know. So Lama Yeshe, for example, one of our friends, Harry, years ago, was in Kopan Monastery helping one of the monks who was sick. And he'd found a doctor to help. And he told Lama Yeshe, just in passing, Lama's his guru, that he'd found this doctor to help this monk. And Lama just dismissed it and said, he doesn't need a doctor, just leave it be. So Harry trusted Lama. So the boy got sicker and sicker, eventually went up to the mountains, he's a Sherpa, and he died. Well, that could sound like Lama Yeshe was very cruel, you know? Do you understand? So Lama Lundab explained to Harry wasn't doubting, but Lama Lundab explained, well, because of Lama's clairvoyance, meaning seeing the monk, and this means knowing exactly what karma he'd created, which was the cause of this particular sickness, Lama could see exactly, with his wisdom, with his clairvoyance, that if he'd gotten better, he would have been fine, had a good life. But he wouldn't have finished that heavy karma that was the cause of it, and next life would have been much worse. So by having the sickness and by dying young, he purified all the karma, next life fantastic. Now who has that kind of wisdom? We don't have any wisdom. We're just addicted to making it all nice now, you know. So it's kind of intense. There you go. So that's some of the things you can have. Some things you can experience with your mind. Any questions? Any questions? A whole 2 hours I've not asked one question. Come on, questions. Questions, folks. Please now questions about anything you like. We'll go more into compassion later. Yep.
Thanks to your advice yesterday with the last meditation, I should stay more focused.
Well done. It's pretty quick. Oh my God. Can you move the chair? Yeah. And? Space open. She's pretty dramatic. Oh, sorry, so it doesn't hurt. It's just the right part of my head is flat. Go on, I'm listening.
You talked about samadhi, so
this is what we're talking here. Yeah.
Stages, right? So how do you recognize probably the first 1, 2, 3 stages?
Well, you have to learn the technique, like anything. You learn the technique. You get a good teacher, and you learn the technique. Well, no, we've had it in countless lifetimes, and we've lost it, obviously. So you got to. It won't. Nothing lasts until you do it every day. And in the Buddha's teachings, in the long term, until you've used your samadhi to cut the root of all delusions and realize emptiness, then nothing lasts until then. Everything passes. Everything's impermanent. Nothing lasts. So you've got to continue with that concentration to then get wisdom and realize emptiness and cut the root of all delusions. That's what lasts. But it won't last. Of course not. We've had it many lifetimes. And we can have it in this lifetime and you can lose it by stop practicing. Of course. Absolutely. Absolutely. Someone else? Questions? Yes? Yeah, go on. Well, this is what this is. This is what telepathy is, isn't it? Knowing someone's mind. That's exactly right. No, okay. I understand. I understand. I understand. What do you mean not as advanced? Okay, now listen. Okay, listen. Okay. If we take the view of karma, then you come programmed in this life with past habits. So anybody who's got any even a flash of something happening or what you're talking about, that's just from past habits. Some people have no empathy because they're completely self-centered. That's because they're past habit. So the point about what you just said, telepathy, is exactly what telepathy is. It's having, but mostly in our culture, we don't know it's something you can learn. We just think, oh, wow, something special, wow, I'm special. No, I forget the empathy part. I'll talk about that in a minute. But people having a flash of a moment, oh, I was an Egyptian princess 42 lives ago, or that kind of thing. It means that person must have done some meditation in the past, but they've got a tiny bit of the memory of it, that's all. But we don't posit past lives, so we don't know why we've got it, so we think it's mysterious. Do you understand what I'm saying? But it's just a symptom of having done it before. Like a person who likes music. They've done it before, that's all. A person who likes to kill because they've done it before. That's all. 1 point. Second, so it can be learned. There's the technique. You can learn it. And it can be perfect. The second one, the same thing that you're talking is what Lama's saying. The one level of this clairvoyance, a grosser one, is exactly what you're talking. A sense of connectedness with others and an empathy of what they're feeling. Well, then, of course, the West, we don't think that's nervous. We're nervous about that because we don't know how to work with it. We don't know how to control it. So because we've got attachment, you see, attachment is this junkie in us. Everybody's got it to one degree or another. It wants only the nice thing. So as soon as you have empathy for other people's suffering, we don't realize we're suffering from that suffering because our attachment's getting upset. Are you seeing my point? Are you seeing my point? That's why we think we have to close it off. No, don't close off the empathy. Never get rid of attachment. Then we don't get upset when we see suffering and we get courage and we continue to grow more compassion and get more wisdom and more courage to keep wanting to help people. Are you understanding my point? That's the key to it. Does that make sense? Good. So go for it. Don't ever try to cut it. But some people have it so extreme that then they go nuts because they don't know what to do with it. And that's our big problem, you know. So this is where it's very interesting. It's like, if we understand attachment and aversion, and these words are so simple, I keep saying this, but the more we think about this and meditate on this and become familiar with these in our mind, which is Buddha's unique approach, we can really see how profoundly deep they are. And these are the two that are running all the time. So attachment in us isn't just meaning, oh, you like sex and drugs and cakes, you know. That sounds like very gross. It can be, it's way more subtle. And the way that generally way to talk about attachment, this neurotic voice of ego, is it only wants the nice things. You can be a very pleasant person who never gets really kind of grossly angry, but attachment's a junkie that only can bear pleasant things. It wants nice place and nice weather and nice people, and it doesn't want to see suffering. It can't bear to see suffering. So if we've also got on the good side, in our virtues, we've got compassion. So attachment to have everything nice then gets upset. And so in a person like you maybe, a person like me, when my attachment doesn't get what it wants, especially as I was younger, when my attachment didn't get what it wanted, I'd get volatile anger. But a person like you, maybe, I don't know your nature, people who don't have anger, but get more upset or depressed. That's internalized aversion. Do you understand? It's internalized. So a friend of mine, I remember, she, not an angry type person, but she, like everybody's got attachment, and when her attachment doesn't get what it wants, she'd become depressed. Because that's like odd, because basically aversion is no, I don't want to know. I can't cope with it. Go away. So when you're an angry person, you punch it. But depression, you go in. And she'd have panic attacks because she couldn't cope. Like she was into environmentalism. And she'd even be just seeing a tree that was not quite right. She'd have a panic attack. Well, that's her aversion. It becomes depression and anxiety. Mine, I'd just go out and kill all the people who did the wrong tree, sort of thing. So aversion has a spectrum. Volatile anger all the way to annoyed, irritated, frustrated, and then despair and depression. They're all the response to attachment not getting what it wants. Do you understand? So that's your negative side. Now the positive side, having empathy, and you feel people suffering. But because we've got attachment, it can't stand to see the suffering. That's when we get depressed or don't know what to do about it. We've got no barrier. That's why people say cut it off. Do you understand? Don't cut off the empathy, cut off the attachment and the aversion. Then you get the courage of no matter how bad things are. The bodhisattvas who've given up attachment and aversion have infinite capacity to bear. They see the suffering, and what it does for them is give them courage to keep on working on themselves so they can keep helping. Do you understand? That's the point. That's the real one, to get the courage to do that. For those people.
You mentioned before that there are two kinds of meditation. So
Yes, concentration. That's right.
for the meditation,
Yes,
and the second one, the insight.
yes.
Maybe other people are familiar with the insight one, but for me that's information.
No, I understand. No, there's a lot of confusion about this, and most we don't really understand. And it's really because these words, we get confused, you know. We get confused even about the word meditation. So it's really simple, actually. In general, in daily life, you know that if you want to make a cake, you've got to have concentration. If you can't focus for more than a half a second, you can do nothing. You can do nothing. You couldn't even kill a person properly if you haven't got concentration. That's why concentration in the third category is like the neutral states, but it's utterly necessary. So you've got to be able to focus. Well, all concentration meditation is a brilliant technique to really focus. Now, you've got to ask, why do I want focus? Because what are you trying to do here? Well, use it as a simple example. You want to make a cake. So you get your focus first. Then you have to close the door, get all your things all lined up, tell the kids to go away, and now you can focus. Now what do? You've got to start, you go to the second mode, and you're going to use your mind now to think about something. So what would you be thinking about? What would be the proper thinking you'd want to do now? You're trying to make a cake. So how would you use your thoughts? That's right. That's right. So you've got to have focus first, don't you? So it's a prerequisite. But the real job is to make the cake, right? And you've got to use intelligent thinking. First I have this, and then I have that, and you've got to remember what you just did. You've got to remember what you've got to do now, and you've got to remember what you've got to do in the minute. If you keep getting scattered, you'll never make a cake. So it's really simple. So what you've got in the end, the insight is referring to the end result, getting the cake. And the method you use is common sense analysis, thinking through the process and doing it with concentration. So concentration is the basis. Then what you do, the end result is to get the cake. That's called insight. Use as the analogy. And what the method to get insight is thinking. And you think through intelligently the recipe. Would you agree with that process? Well, here we're talking concentration is the first one. The insight, what we need insight, ultimately, is into how things exist. Finally, emptiness. But the method you use is thinking through logically the process. Now, in ordinary daily life, you can use this. This is classically the way it's presented in the teachings. But if you use this methodology in daily life, let's say we just had a fight, and your mind's berserk and you're trying to think it through. You sit in your room and you get some focus first. You try to get some focus first. Then you think it through and you want a conclusion, which is to give up being angry with me and forgive me and then want to move forward. Something simple. So you've first got to get some focus. If you can't focus your mind, you can do nothing. Then you've got some focus. Now you go to the second mode. The end result, which is the insight, is to have a happy mind, let's say. So you think through the steps. Not think about it, meaning, oh, just let any thought come, but you're in charge of your thinking. You don't just sit there intuitively and think now the eggs and now the milk and now the flour. You do it properly. So here you think, so if you're doing mathematics, you don't just think it through randomly. You've got to have focus first. The result is to get the answer. Number 2 is the answer to 1 + 1. So the method you use to get the answer, the insight into 2, is plus 1 is this and plus is that and equals this. And you go, oh, I get it. That's the insight. So here, the classic insight is into emptiness, in the final result of everything. But the methodology you use is the logical thinking that triggers the insight. So it's not complicated. We make it complicated. So Buddha taught in earlier stages of our practice, in the junior school and high school, he teaches many kinds of insight meditations. And the one that's most popularly known, because Vipassana is the term that's used, and it's almost like a separate religion now, it's taking the particular technique that Buddha used, based on concentration first, then the insight is into impermanence, and the methodology is to scan the experience of the body. Some people maybe have done this. I've never done it, you know. Have you people know this one? There you go. So the insight that you want to get is impermanence. The methodology is going through the sensations of your body, but based on concentration. So concentration is the first thing. Then you go to the insight mode, and the methodology you're using to get insight into impermanence is the experiences of your body. Do you understand? So it isn't complicated. We make it complicated because we're not used to these words. Does that make sense, people? Does that make sense, people? You're comprehending. So it depends on what you want to get insight into. So here, Lama's talking about what they call special insight, which means emptiness. And the method, okay, we all know, if you've read Tibetan Buddhist teachings, there's a thing called concentration meditation and analytical meditation. You've heard that term before, right? Well, that confuses us. Analytical, meditation, they seem like contradiction. Well, you know, the word actually in Tibetan that translates as meditation, or meditation translates as, is the word gom, and it's the verb to familiarize. Well, this really throws us. So the real meaning of meditation is to familiarize your mind with how to make a cake, familiarize your mind with mathematics, familiarize your mind with wisdom, familiarize your mind with virtue, whatever it might be. First, you've got to have concentration. Then you use the thinking. So analysis, analytical meditation. To meditate means to familiarize. Put your knee underneath. You've got Dharma there. You've got your knee on your guru's name. Underneath you, Lama Zopa's name is there. That's right. Thank you. So you've got concentration first. It's just a preliminary. Concentration, so you can do something. Then you want to get insight into, what did I say? What was it we're getting insight into? I forgot. No. Okay. Start again. Yeah, start again. The classic coupling of concentration and insight in the Mahayana one is insight into emptiness. The one here is insight into impermanence. The method that's used in the second mode to get emptiness is called analysis. Well, what is analysis? It's a fancy word for to think about. You know, you could say you analyze the cake product, or you think it through. You're thinking something through, basically. So analytical meditation is a fancy term for thinking something through logically. And that thinking something through logically will always trigger an insight into, oh, I get it. We live our lives like this. You think something through and you get the answer. That's what it's referring to. But it's done in more subtle meditation because you've got subtle concentration and the mind is super sophisticated. At a subtle level, you don't just space out in concentration meditation. When you've got concentration, you're capable of using that subtle level of concentration in any damn way you like. And you can do the most subtle analysis that can quickly trigger the most subtle insight. And the more focus, the more powerful your analysis, and therefore the more easy to get an insight. And in other words, the more concentration, that's what in the zone means. The more concentration you've got when you're playing the piano, it feels like it's like effortless. I mean, I just read recently, what's his name? Djokovic. He beat the latest bloke he beat in tennis. And he said, he won today? Oh, they're playing today. He's playing Nadal, isn't he? I know. Oh, it would have been, no, Federer lost. It's Nadal. And they played already. It's Australia. They're 12 hours behind, so they're already playing. It's done already. We've already got a winner. We'll just have to look later. Nadal won. He won. He beat Djokovic. Is that what she's saying? What? What'd she say? Oh, she doesn't know. Well, we'll look. We'll find out. Look now. Look who won. I mean, it's 12 hours ago. They played already. Or 9. Yeah, 12 hours ago. Easily in Australia now. More. What? I think Djokovic won. I've got a feeling Djokovic beat him. I think because he said he was in the zone. It was effortless. That's what good concentration brings. But that's just the grossest level. And then naturally, the result comes more easily. So again, concentration is the first mode of meditation. Many people think that's what meditation is, but it's only the beginning. In other words, you got concentration. You don't go to the kitchen and say, now I've made a cake. The only reason you want to focus so you can make the cake. Djokovic?
Australian Open, Novak Djokovic versus Rafael Nadal tennis, live score streaming.
Okay, just get the answer, please.
Rafael Nadal to 15th
Who? Djokovic. I thought so, yeah. Yeah, I know. Anyway, well done. So he said like being in the zone. So again, 2 modes of meditation. First kind, concentration, which most people think of as meditation. It's just the beginning to get your mind super clear. Then the second mode is to get insight into whatever you damn well like, into killing people, into making cakes. You do what you like. You can decide what you want to get insight into. But here, the final one is insight into emptiness, and we're going to talk about that after lunch. So emptiness, the method, this is the point again, the method. Okay, you go to school, you learn 1 + 1 is 2. Your teacher says, go home, I want you to get some concentration, Rabina, then I want you to go to the second mode of meditation, and I want you to get insight into this. All she says is go home and do your homework. And we know that what she means is she wants you to understand the meaning of 1 + 1. She wants you to internalize it, isn't it? That's what insight is. It's internal knowledge. That's why the English word is really great. I don't know what the German is, but the French is weird, because it makes it all religious. Insight, inner seeing. It's a beautiful term. What is the term you use in German? Who? Same one. That's perfect word. Inner knowing. It's obvious. It's really clear. So your teacher says, here's the information. 1 + 1 is 2. You've never heard this before. It's brand new information for you, but she says go home and internalize it. That's your homework. So what do? You get some focus first, hopefully. Then you go to the actual work and you think it through. It's hardly rocket science. And you go, you've got to have the right information though. You've got to have the right words. You've got to have the right recipe. If you have the wrong recipe, you can have as much concentration as you like. You will never get a cake, baby. So you've got to have 1. You've got to know what 1 means. You've got to know what plus means. You've got to know what 2 means. You've got to know what equal means. You've got to put these concepts together. And then when you've got it all together and you practice using your blocks or you write it down, and at some point you go, oh, mummy, I get it. That's the insight. So it's exactly the same with emptiness. You have your focus. You've got to go to the second mode. You've got to have the information. So one of the best logical arguments for emptiness is dependent arising. You can't just go, you don't just go, oh, I've got concentration, and now you just go, 1 + 1 is 2, 1 + 1 is 2, 1 + 1 is 2, hoping for the penny to drop. It won't. You've got to think it through. That's the meaning of analytical meditation. So we have a confusion about that because we think meditation means spacing out. Analysis, what do you mean? We get confused because our definitions aren't the same as Buddha's, Are we communicating here? It's not complicated. We live our lives like this. We just don't think of it this way when it comes to meditation, We get so confused. And the other mistake about meditation, people can use that word if they like. Buddha doesn't own it, okay? People can make up their own definition. You can have your own definition even of mindfulness. But don't call it Buddha's if you've made up yours. It's really inappropriate. So mindfulness is a very interesting word. In Buddhist psychology, like we're talking, you've got these different categories of states of mind. The 3. Some are neurotic, some are valid, some are virtuous, and some are these mechanics. That's my word. And there's many of them. And so one of them is called concentration. One is called love. That's in the virtue. One is called attachment. That's in the negative. One is called concentration. Another one is called mindfulness. Well, all that is the ability to not forget what you're doing moment by moment. That's it. But people use it to mean virtue. People use it to mean all sorts of things. But it's simply, really my feeling is it's better to call it not forgetfulness. It's merely not. So that's why Lama Zopa, he says thieves need mindfulness. I remember one person in California who's a Vipassana practitioner, he got so upset he left the teaching and then wrote and complained that I insulted Vipassana meditation because I said thieves need mindfulness. Well, it's true, because mindfulness is neither good nor bad. It's not a virtue, but we think of it as a holy thing. We think of it as special. It's over-exaggerating. It's simply the ability to not forget what you're doing. You need it when you make a cake or when you kill somebody. But we give it all this extra meaning. And then we think, so then, anyway, this is Buddha's approach. So you can decide what you'd like, but there's a lot of variations of it around, you know. Any more questions? Try it.
When we are a beginner meditator, how do we know what amount of shamatha and what amount of investigation should we
Well, when you are making the cake and you see you're being really scattered and you can't concentrate, that tells you better do more concentration. If you're making the cake and you manage to do it quite well, then it means you can do you have to know by your own experience. Of course, you have to have a good teacher and know what you're doing properly and have the right instructions. And then, like anything, in the beginning, you're a bit tentative. Your piano teacher says, do it this way. So when you go home and you do it, or how long should I do my arpeggios and how long should I do my scales? Well, you have to remember what your teacher told you. But eventually you become your own teacher and you know the benefit. And you know now enough scales, now you do your arpeggios. So you start with the instructions and you learn it better and then you become more skillful. It's like anything. Does that sound right? Good. What else, people? What else, people? Yes. That's right. Well, I mean, had to. I know. That's right. That's right. Exactly. That's right. Yes. We do. Exactly. That's right. Yes. Yes, I understand. I understand. No, I do understand. No, I understand. I understand. I understand. Well, then, okay. It's all to do with our level of capacity. So completely nothing wrong. Okay. The normal view, the normal way we are, without thinking any dharma, without understanding this process, we're junkies for pleasure. We crave to only have nice experiences. So the millisecond we have a toothache or a knee ache, our attachment shifts from wanting the nice things to being free of the ugly thing. So naturally we go to the dentist and do this and do that. And we get really distressed if the dentist doesn't fix the problem. That's why we suffer. So now the first step then in practice is to recognize at least that. Begin to recognize its attachment in doing that ridiculous thing. So fine, still know you can't cope with the toothache. You're not brave enough yet to function with the toothache. So out of kindness and intelligence, you go to the dentist so that you can continue to be a useful person. That's the ideal view. And then if you're really brave at the bodhisattva level, they would rather have the bad things than the good things happen. Because every time a good thing happens, you're using up your virtue. Every time a bad thing happens, you're finishing your suffering. They'd rather have bad things. So it's up to your level. But always to do it consciously with a good motivation, then it makes it not samsaric. Do you understand? You have to know where you're at, you know. That's exactly the thing. There you go. That's right. So don't feel bad about it. It's very sensitive. I remember when I first went to Kopan Monastery, and I had diarrhea, and I could get so sick. Used to get so sick. You don't get so much anymore. And I was feeling all this drama. I'm suffering. I have to put up with this suffering, and it was like ridiculous. And Lama Yeshe passed me and said, "Go get some diarrhea tablets." You know, it was so simple. You know, I felt embarrassed. I was being all kind of morbid and self-piteous. Just take a tablet and shut up. You know. You understand? But the point is this. And this is where, when you get pain, this is how attachment works. It's very deep, you know. Attachment is always craving to get the nice thing. And then the second the unnice thing happens, then attachment shifts its focus to being rid of the unnice thing. But then that's where, when you get pain, I get some pain sometimes. All I got to do is think of the people who have pain all the time. And I just think, how can you live like that? I can imagine killing yourself if you lived in pain, because there's nothing, you can never, ever wait for it to end because you know it won't. That's unbearable. I can't imagine that, you know. This is really incredible, isn't it? Because look at our attachment. The second the smallest pain comes, craving to get rid of the pain and doing everything we can to stop the pain. But the point is, let's say, this is where if you learn to recognize attachment and aversion, still, yes, go to the dentist. But know that maybe, and this is what happens, people go to an operation. One woman I talked to had some eye problem, and she came out of the operation with a 10 times worse eye problem. So this can happen too. You know, they can pull out the wrong teeth, or you can get a disease. So not to have all the expectation of the freedom from suffering, it mightn't always come. So this is where working on attachment and aversion every day is so powerful. And then when the suffering does come, this is where the courage to put up with it is such a difficult practice. It's such a difficult practice, you know. It's unbelievably difficult. This is daily life. We know this. This is why I was, you know, Buddha says nothing wrong with changing something. Please change it. Nothing wrong. But what if you can't? And this is where I've always quote the experiences of my friends in prison, you know. They know they can't, they're locked, they're in, they can't get out. So they've got no choice but to change their mind, you know. You've got no choice, you're up against the wall. That's why there's an extreme example I always use, you know, this woman on death row in Florida years ago. She's this hippie. I remember reading about her yesterday in the New York Times again. She's 70-something now, but in the 70s she was hitching with a hippie husband and their kids. And whatever it was, they're in a car and the police stop them and the guy driving kills the police and blames the hippie. So they're on death row in Florida. The husband even gets executed. I mean, can you even imagine the nightmare, you know? And she did yoga and things, I think. She must be such a special person. So she said, at some point I realized I couldn't change anything. But they couldn't take my mind from me, you know. So I decided I'm not a monk. I'm not a prisoner, I'm a monk. I'm not in a cell, I'm in a cave. So not only did she reinterpret her experience for her own sanity, but she even that's applying emptiness. And now we're lunchtime now, but we can talk about it later. That as Lama Zopa says, everything's merely labelled. You can change the label of your experience, and that's really what you're trying to do. Call the pain good, which sounds like a joke to us, like sort of cruel, you know. When we really understand that nothing has an inherent nature, when it does not exist in the object, only because of attachment and we're so addicted to it this way, we think it's almost like a joke to say change the label. But this woman had the ability. It was astonishing, you know. I decided I'm not a prisoner. I'm a monk. I decided I'm not in a cell. I'm in a cave. I mean, that's stupendous courage, you know. So meaning she was in this hideous environment, husband's executed, accused of everything, lost the children. Even I remember also the children were in the care of the grandparents, and the grandparents died in a car accident, so they lost the children to the system, you know. You can't imagine the suffering. You can't even believe the amount of suffering. So finally she got out after 17 years. And then she met some fellow, an Irish guy, who'd also been accused of murder, was going to be executed in England for killing the police, Irish. And he got out too. And now they're living together in Ireland and they're doing it in America as well. They've got a program where they help wrongly accused people who come out of prison. He's like 80 and she's like 70. These dear, good human beings, you know. So moving, actually. So change our mind. So hard. My God, it's so hard. Sounds so simple.